Marilyn Monroe named the 5 Golden Age Hollywood actors who were the worst in bed. Forget the blinding camera flashes and the platinum perfection Hollywood sold for decades. Behind the carefully manufactured fantasy was a woman the world desired, but rarely understood. Marilyn Monroe, the ultimate symbol of sex appeal, often fell asleep in tears, shivering beside men who wanted a prize, not a person. In the quiet desperation of her final years, Marilyn didn't just leave behind unanswered questions. She left behind a list. It wasn't about presidents or mobsters. It was a private reckoning, a confession about 5 legendary men from Hollywood's golden age. 5 so-called gods of the silver screen who, behind closed doors, failed her completely. She wrote about their selfishness, their cruelty, and their profound inability to love. These weren't just bad lovers. They were men who took her light and gave her nothing but emptiness in return. Tonight, we open that diary, not to glorify scandal, but to strip away the glamour and expose the loneliness Marilyn endured. And it begins with a man who shared the screen with her in one of the greatest comedies ever made. One, Tony Curtis. To understand why Tony Curtis tops Marilyn's list, we have to go back to 1958, to the sun-soaked sands of the Hotel del Coronado during the filming of Some Like It Hot. On screen, the set sparkled with laughter and charm. Off-screen, tension hung thick in the air. Marilyn was unraveling, struggling with lines, battling anxiety, and craving reassurance. Tony Curtis, handsome and confident, appeared to offer comfort. To the public, they were Hollywood perfection. Then came the betrayal. After filming Wrapped, Curtis infamously told reporters that kissing Marilyn was like kissing Hitler. The remark echoed for decades, shaping a narrative that painted Marilyn as difficult and unlovable. But her private writings tell a different story. Marilyn described Curtis as a man consumed by himself. Intimacy, to him, was not connection, it was performance. He approached sex with surgical precision, stripped of warmth or vulnerability. A germaphobe obsessed with control, he treated closeness as contamination rather than communion. There was no passion, no sweat, no emotional messiness. Just a rehearsed routine so sterile it left her feeling invisible. The most devastating detail wasn't what he did. It was where he looked. During their most intimate moments, Curtis didn't meet her gaze. He stared past her, fixated on his reflection in the mirror, checking his hair, admiring himself. Marilyn wasn't a partner. She was a prop in his one-man show. His cruelty wasn't accidental. It was fueled by jealousy. Curtis resented how every room tilted toward Marilyn, how her presence eclipsed his own. In private, he punished her with indifference. The infamous insult wasn't humor. It was the lash of a wounded ego. To Marlon Brando. If Tony Curtis represented Hollywood's polished lie, Marlon Brando embodied its raw, unfiltered underside. By the mid-1950s, Brando was a phenomenon, brooding, magnetic, untouchable. Marilyn, hungry for artistic depth, believed he might understand her. Instead, she found neglect. In his New York apartment, glamour vanished. Marilyn wrote of overpowering odors, unwashed sheets, stale food, and a man who wore filth like a declaration of masculinity. Brando confused disorder with authenticity. Their intimacy felt violent, not passionate. There was no tenderness, no anticipation, only consumption. Marilyn described herself as a vessel for his frustrations, absorbing his rage and restlessness. Bruises replaced affection. Silence replaced care. What broke her wasn't just the physical roughness. It was the realization that beneath his brooding exterior was not depth, but emptiness. His method was often an excuse for laziness and self-absorption. The wild animal wasn't liberated. He was simply careless. 3. Frank Sinatra, power without warmth. From Marlon Brando's chaos, Marilyn stepped into something even colder: control. At the Cal Neva Lodge in 1961, Frank Sinatra ruled like a monarch. This wasn't just a resort. It was a private kingdom where Hollywood glamour merged seamlessly with money, influence, and quiet menace. Sinatra sat at the center of it all, holding court with politicians, businessmen, and men whose power was never officially acknowledged. To the public, he was romance incarnate. The velvet voice, the perfectly tailored suits, the illusion of a man who understood love better than anyone alive. But Marilyn's private writings reveal a chilling contradiction. Behind closed doors, intimacy with Sinatra felt less like affection and more like a transaction. He was obsessively clean, showering constantly, scrubbing himself raw, yet emotionally sterile. His body was controlled, precise, and distant, as if affection itself were something to be managed rather than shared. In bed, Sinatra wasn't cruel in the way Brando was. He was colder. Everything happened according to his rules, his timing, his desires. Marilyn described being directed rather than embraced, instructed rather than desired. There was no room for spontaneity, no warmth, no softness. Passion was replaced with procedure. When it was over, the emotional vacuum was immediate. He would turn away without a word. Sometimes he would get up, dress, and leave, walking out to rejoin friends at the card tables, leaving Marilyn alone in sheets that felt colder than before. But what disturbed her most went beyond indifference. Marilyn began to feel like currency. In the presence of Sinatra's powerful inner circle, she sensed that she wasn't there as a partner, but as a symbol, a beautiful accessory, a status object, something to be displayed, referenced, perhaps even offered, to reinforce alliances and impress dangerous men. Whether implied or explicit, the message was the same. Her value was not intrinsic. It was strategic. Sinatra didn't see a woman in need of care. He saw an asset that enhanced his power. For Marilyn, this was dehumanization at its most refined. No shouting, no bruises, just ownership wrapped in elegance. He reduced her to a function, something that belonged to him, something that reflected his dominance. If Brando overwhelmed her with chaos, Sinatra froze her with authority. For Laurence Olivier, after the brutal certainty of Sinatra's control, Marilyn hoped England would offer something different. Filming The Prince and the Showgirl in London, she believed she was stepping into legitimacy. This was her chance to be seen not as a sex symbol, but as an artist. Laurence Olivier was the gatekeeper to that world. He was everything Marilyn wasn't allowed to be. Refined, educated, unquestioned. She arrived desperate for his approval, hungry to learn, hoping intimacy might soften the rigid hierarchy between them. Instead, she found quiet humiliation. Olivier approached intimacy exactly as he approached Shakespeare, technically flawless and emotionally sealed off. Every movement was precise, every gesture measured. He knew exactly what to do and when to do it, but it felt rehearsed, as if he were performing the idea of passion rather than experiencing it. Marilyn felt the absence immediately. There was no abandon, no vulnerability, no warmth, just execution, and beneath it all, judgment. She wrote of feeling watched rather than wanted, evaluated rather than embraced. Even in moments of physical closeness, she could sense his detachment, his faint amusement, his restrained superiority. He looked at her as if she were an interesting experiment, not an equal. But the true damage wasn't physical. It was intellectual. Olivier made Marilyn feel small. He reinforced every insecurity she carried about her intelligence. His raised eyebrows, his silences, his patronizing patience communicated a single message. You do not belong here. She felt clumsy, too emotional, too American, too much. This wasn't explosive abuse. It was erosion, a steady chipping away at her confidence. He didn't have to say she was inferior. His demeanor did the work for him. He treated her body as pleasing, but her mind as disposable. For a woman who spent her life fighting to be taken seriously, this was devastating. Olivier didn't just fail to love her. He confirmed her deepest fear that no matter how hard she tried, she would never be enough. 5. Clark Gable, The Illusion That Shattered. The final name on Marilyn's list isn't marked by cruelty or ego. It's marked by grief. Clark Gable wasn't a lover in the traditional sense. He was a symbol, a lifelong fantasy. As a child moving through foster homes, Marilyn carried his image like a talisman. She told people he was her real father, In her mind, he represented safety, strength, and permanence. So when she stood opposite him in The Misfits in 1960, she believed fate had finally intervened. She believed that at last someone would protect her. Instead, she found a man at the end. Gable was fading, physically and emotionally. Years of smoking and drinking had hollowed him out. Marilyn didn't write about passion with him. She wrote about sickness, about the smell of alcohol and tobacco clinging to his skin, about trembling hands and labored breathing. She became a caretaker. In their private moments, the dynamic reversed completely. The man she hoped would hold her instead leaned on her. He fell asleep mid-conversation. His strength was gone. His body failed him. Marilyn found herself soothing coughing fits, wiping sweat, watching a legend unravel in real time. Desire collapsed into pity. And pity, she realized, is the death of intimacy. When Gable died shortly after filming ended, Marilyn was consumed by guilt. She believed her emotional needs had burdened him, that the stress of protecting her, of trying to live up to the image she projected onto him, had hastened his death. This was the final fracture. Tony Curtis made her feel invisible. Marlon Brando made her feel expendable. Frank Sinatra made her feel owned. Laurence Olivier made her feel stupid. But Clark Gable destroyed her hope. He wasn't cruel. He was proof that even heroes fail, and that searching for salvation in another human being leads only to loss. 6. Joe DiMaggio, protection that became a cage. Joe DiMaggio was supposed to be the answer. After actors, rebels, kings, and intellectuals, Marilyn believed she had finally found safety in a man who wasn't performing. A man from outside Hollywood. A man who loved her not for her image, but for her vulnerability. America's greatest sports hero and its greatest sex symbol. It felt like destiny. But what Marilyn found was not protection. It was possession. DiMaggio loved Norma Jean, not Marilyn Monroe. And the distinction became a weapon. In private, Joe was quiet, brooding, and deeply uncomfortable with her fame. He didn't know how to exist in her world, and instead of adapting, he tried to shrink it. Marilyn wrote of a man who wanted her smaller, quieter, covered. He wanted her brilliance dimmed so he could stand beside her without feeling eclipsed. Intimacy with DiMaggio wasn't chaotic or cruel at first. It was heavy, weighted with expectation. He didn't rage in bed, he hovered, watched, judged. Marilyn felt his insecurity even in moments meant to be tender. Desire was tangled with resentment. Affection came with conditions. And then came the anger. Joe's jealousy didn't explode, it simmered. It showed itself in clenched jaws, in long silences, in an undercurrent of shame he placed squarely on her shoulders. He wanted a wife, not a symbol. Private woman, not a public fantasy. And every time the world celebrated Marilyn Monroe, Joe DiMaggio felt betrayed. Marilyn wrote that his touch carried tension, not warmth, as if he were holding on to something he feared might escape. He didn't want to share her, not with the world, not with herself. What broke her wasn't the arguments. It was the realization that Joe loved an idea that required her to disappear. Protection turned into control. Love turned into surveillance. And intimacy became another place where she felt monitored rather than cherished. Joe DiMaggio didn't want to hurt her, but he wanted to own her. 7. Arthur Miller, love that withheld itself. Arthur Miller was the last great hope. After men who consumed her body, controlled her image, or diminished her intelligence, Marilyn believed she had finally found someone who would see her soul. A writer, a thinker, a man who valued words, depth, and emotional truth. Being chosen by Arthur Miller felt like redemption. First, it almost worked. Arthur listened. He spoke gently. He made Marilyn feel serious, important in a way no one else ever had. She believed marriage to him would finally make her safe from the world's cruelty. But slowly, painfully, the warmth faded. Marilyn wrote of a growing distance that had nothing to do with arguments and everything to do with absence. Arthur wasn't unkind. He was withholding. He retreated into his mind, into his work, into silence. Where other men overwhelmed her, Miller left her starving. Intimacy with him felt tentative, cautious, restrained. Marilyn sensed his hesitation, his reluctance to fully engage with her physically. Desire felt secondary to analysis. Even in moments meant to be connective, she felt observed, like a character being studied rather than a woman being loved. What devastated her most was discovering that Arthur was ashamed of her fragility. He admired her beauty, but struggled with her need. He loved the idea of rescuing her, but recoiled when rescue became responsibility. Marilyn wrote that he saw her sadness not as pain to be soothed, but as a flaw to be corrected, or worse, endured. She felt herself becoming an obligation. Arthur didn't rage. He didn't belittle her openly. Instead, he withdrew affection in subtle ways. Less touch, less reassurance, less presence. Marilyn found herself performing happiness to keep him close, suppressing her fear so she wouldn't be a burden. And then she discovered his private writings. Reading his words, his doubts, his disappointments, shattered her completely.